How many frets in an octave is that one?
Okay. So this is 27 notes, 27 frets before you hit the octave. So here you go. So 27 notes per octave.
All right, that was Brendan Byrnes, a track called Alive, which I was turned on to by a Make Weird Music commenter. I do these playlist videos where I put together some interesting music. And somebody said, you should check out this microtonal guy, Brendan Byrnes. And I'm like, oh, great. I get a lot of this microtonal music, and it's usually not very enjoyable. But Brendan, I have to say, your music is really enjoyable, and it's
Oh, wow, thank you.
microtonal.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you, by the way, for including it in that playlist. That was really awesome to see. But yeah, I try to make it enjoyable. I mean, honestly, that's one of my main goals. And I think the main challenge with microtonal music for me is how do I get these crazy scales and harmonies to actually not just totally rub people the wrong way, and including me. I'm not a huge fan of just like extreme dissonance. I mean, I like it in doses, but I love having contrasts and consonant sounds and traditional tension and release kind of stuff. So sort of learning that you could do that with microtonal music, that was a huge deal to me. And I've been doing it for almost 15 years now and just trying to find a way to make it enjoyable. So I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah, man, I gotta say, I've heard a lot of really just microtonal music is usually like something that gets under my skin, like some people say the nails on the chalkboard effect. But with your music, it just creates this really like you're borderline unpleasant, like it's never unpleasant, but there's always just this like, oh, what's happening? There's like something uncomfortable almost at all times. And in that song, I love that one because there are these chords that kind of are washing throughout the track, and they are all using some microtonality, especially near the end, like very long reverberated chords. And I love the tension that it brings, and it just makes me like, it makes me smile and it makes me almost wince a little bit, but it's like this really, you can't get that in any other music. And while I don't think your music would, be called weird in the sense that other people may expect it, I think it's really weird that you've been able to take this odd effect and make it part of such good music and pleasant music, So for people who aren't familiar with microtonality, I see you've got some guitars behind you. Could you just kind of show what it is that you're doing and what it means?
Sure. Yeah. Here, let me flip my amp on real quick. Let's see. Actually, you know what? I'll start with this. So, microtonal theory is like, it's a whole rabbit hole that you can go down, and it's hard to like sort of summarize, but I would say sorry, this is kind of a buzzy setup, but the headlines I think are there's new consonant intervals, and there's and by new I mean that they're not in our 12-note Western scale that most people in the West are using. Indian music, there's cultures all over the world that have different number of notes and are using this stuff too. So when I say new, I sort of mean like new for, the Western world. The key to understanding microtonal music is the harmonic series. So if anybody's interested in this stuff, that's like the place to start. But so for example, the harmonic series has, okay, cool.
That works.
Great. So the harmonic series, it's basically this giant chord of intervals that we hear in the timbre of pitched instruments. So like on a guitar, when I play a note, we're hearing the fundamental frequency, but we're hearing all of these frequencies on top. And those frequencies on top, it follows the same pattern, whether it's a saxophone or piano, guitar, voice even. And the harmonics above it, it's this giant chord. It's actually like if you look at the first 8 harmonics, it's actually a big 7th chord. So, but the 7th, like, so do, mi, so, te, like that dominant 7th, it's actually really sharp in our 12-note scale. So if you tune it, that 7th to the harmonic series, it sounds like this. Where in our 12 note scale, we have, that's the note we're used to. But in the harmonic series, it's tuned like that. So it's flatter. It's actually 30 cents flat. It's pretty wild sounding, but it's actually more in tune. The intervals are more phase locked. So
it's like it's more mathematically correct, but our
yes.
ears are so trained to a particular sound that it
Exactly.
sounds incorrect.
Right. Yeah. And our 12 note tuning system, it's these aren't like God-given notes. It's an approximation that gets notes in the harmonic series close enough. And then we have a nice even system where we can easily modulate, and all the intervals are the same size. So it's sort of out of convenience. But yeah, it's our 12 notes are actually out of tune, technically. So if you put stuff in tune, you get all these weird microtonal intervals. One of my favorite, I mentioned new intervals. This is sort of my favorite. It's the 11th harmonic, and it falls right in between a perfect fourth and a tritone. So if we were in the key of C major, if you go up the piano, right in between F and F sharp, there's a perfect quarter tone, and it's actually in tune. I think it sounds cool. Here's the sound of it. So by itself, it's kind of wild sounding, but I think in the context of some chords, like, so I'm doing a lot of stuff like that, where the notes that are microtonal in the context of the whole harmony, it sort of blends in a little bit. And here's another. So that's that seventh and the microtone. So
oh man, that is so out there. But it's interesting that like it feels weird even though it isn't weird, right? Because I guess that's how it should be, if things were truly going by the math and, what do they call that? Not just intonation, but
this is just intonation.
It is
You're
just
right.
intonation. Okay. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so how are you writing music, like, pop sounding music using this type of technique or this hardware,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a lot of my music, it's in 4/4. There's a groove. There's kind of traditional melodic shapes, I guess you could say. And the weird stuff comes in. I think it's a little bit more subtle. Like, I don't kind of like beat people over the head with the crazy new intervals. They're blended in. So kind of how you said before, it's like these chords, they sort of, they don't put you at ease. There's something strange about them, but it's hard to put your finger on it because it's sort of part of this like gestalt of a big, texture and timbre and chord, and you don't necessarily process like all of the strangeness of the harmony. Like, you kind of have to, if you like looked at it on paper, it would look insane, but when you hear it, it's just sort of, it's just this thing that hopefully sounds kind of new and interesting.
Is this the guitar you used on Alive?
No, the guitar I used on Alive is actually behind me. Okay. I can play it if you want, or
yeah, well, if you wouldn't mind just showing some of those chords and, the kind of the way that since we've heard this piece of music, like, how are you approaching it? And then there's a part of me that's like, is he just playing normal chords and then moving his finger around to find something interesting? Or is this an intentional Like you know exactly what you're doing with these microtones.
Yeah, I would say, well, I wouldn't say I know exactly what I'm doing because, here, let me get the guitar first.
Uh-huh.
And actually, sort of disclaimer, that song Alive that we just played, I don't remember what I did
That's okay.
on it,
That's okay.
but I can do like a similar thing. So like when I approach a chord progression, sort of what I'm thinking.
Wait. How many frets in an octave is that one?
Okay. So this is 27 notes, 27 frets before you hit the octave. So here you go. Sorry, my guitar's out of the frame. So 27 notes per octave. So back when I said the 12 note system is kind of approximating notes in the harmonic series, this approximates those notes kind of in a different way. But it also approximates some of those weirder harmonics in the harmonic series. So this is also a compromise. But the reason I have an equal tempered system is so you can change keys. The scale shapes are the same. Because just intonation, you just get into weird, very complicated stuff. So this sort of simplifies things. But it also, the thing about just intonation, when everything is like, quote unquote, perfectly in tune, it starts to sound a little bit homogeneous to my ears. So I kind of like the rub of these equal temperament systems. They're a little bit more colorful to me, if that makes sense. So for example, like I also play in a lot of alternate tunings, so I'm sort of like perpetually confused, which is part of the thing I enjoy about microtones. But so for example, here's like a chord progression that I have that's maybe similar to Alive, but so a lot of times I'm thinking about the voice leading. Like voice leading is a really big thing for me, and voice leading is, I think, one of the keys to getting stuff to sound natural. So in my mind, like if I might play a chord like that, and I think it's really pretty. Maybe there's something useful there. I have this going down kind of a quarter tone. So you have that kind of chromatic motion, and then this going down too. And then, so in my head, I'm really hearing like a melody on top, and then I'll harmonize it, and I just sort of intuitively work out like what the harmonies, should be. And honestly, a lot of times I'm composing on a keyboard, so because I don't like getting locked into guitar pattern stuff. I just kind of want to compose, like sing it or hear it in my head and try to figure out what it is. If that makes sense.
Man, this is unbelievable. How I think the thing that comes to mind for me is like sample rates. Like if you have incompatible sample rates, something sounds wrong. You'll get this glitchy effect.
Right.
I could see fitting a 24 note per octave, neck on normal 12 tone music, but 27.
Yeah.
So there's probably only a few notes, if any, that are actually the same frequency on that guitar as a normal 12 fret guitar.
Yeah, no, exactly. The two tunings that I play in are 27 and then 22. Those are my two favorites. So 22 doesn't have any of the same notes, like right on the money. 27 actually has the same major third. Let's see. Sorry, I'm in an alternate tuning, so I can't remember where stuff is. There we go. Yeah, so there's good old major third. So major chords are pretty close in 27, except the fifths are actually, they're pretty sharp. Wait, so they're not that sharp. There we go.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So power chords like with distortion is really not great with this kind of stuff.
So when you're playing a chord, on the keyboard, you're composing music. How are you layering this on top,
Yeah. A lot of the times I will I'll just find an interesting chord and that'll sort of spark like a melody in my head. And I'm usually kind of singing, and I'll have like a sort of a melodic, at least direction that I want to go. And if I can find a second chord, then it's like, okay, then it just sort of, it has momentum at that point. So I'll usually come up with a chord sequence. A lot of time it's, 4 bars, 8 bars, I stay kind of in, traditional pop rock kind of forms a lot, at least to start. And if I can get a chord progression that works, even if it's a little bit wonky, I trust myself enough that I know that with like voice leading and orchestration, I can sort of make those sound smooth. Sort of work it out to the point where it sounds more musical to my ear, especially with like having a melody over something. So oftentimes I will just start with, 4 chords, 8 chords, whatever it is. And with orchestration and voice leading, try to work it to the point where it's, starting to sound good to my ears, if that makes sense.
Incredible. And then before we listen to another track, where do you get an Ibanez hollow body with 27 notes per octave?
Yeah. So there's this guy, 2 guys actually, in Florida. They have a business called Microtonal Music, Ron Sword and Patrick Corrigan. Ron Sword is the main guy, main luthier. He's really into this stuff. He's actually an amazing microtonal metal guitar player too. He has a band called Last Sacrament, and he's been doing this for years. So basically I bought this guitar used. This is just like a really cheap Ibanez hollow body. I sent it to him. He popped the fretboard off, which was pretty difficult. It actually cracked the guitar in a spot, but and then he built this custom fretboard, and he knows all about tuning systems. So yeah, I told him, I was like, I want 27 EDO, and he said cool, and it took him a couple months, and he just sent it back to me. So so he's done this one. I have 2 guitars that are in the 22 system, and I have a 22 bass. So on a lot of my records, the songs that are in 22, I actually have real bass guitar, which is nice.
And you said you have a wife?
I do, yes.
And my wife says things like, I don't like the music that you make, but I'm glad you make music.
Yeah, sounds very familiar.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, she likes some of it.
Yeah.
The stuff where I use a lot of synthesizers, she can't do it. But she likes the more organic guitar based producer stuff. So yeah.
So I want to play this song Operator, unless you think there's like a better song that reflects, what you're doing.
Operator seems to be one that a lot of people like. I think it's my most played song, and I've gotten a lot of compliments about that. So that's a good one, maybe.
This one let's check that.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead. Josh.
Oh, I was just going to say, this one is from a long time ago. This is sort of before I had any of these guitars. I'm using the first guitar I played. I'm using that guitar in this song, but a lot of it's synthesizers, and this song is definitely like just intonation. It's not these equal tempered systems. So
okay, cool.
Lost amongst the moon.
I'll save the rest of it for people to go on and listen. But
Sure. Yeah.
man, you're a great songwriter, Brendan. And this,
Oh, thank you.
I'm curious if you ever play people, or if people listen to your music and then they like if they know you, and they're like they didn't know what the microtonal stuff was. Do you ever get reactions like something sounds really out of tune in your music?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think it's a little bit mixed. I think some people, they just kind of take it for what it is, and they might think something's weird, but they're not necessarily rubbed the wrong way. I've seen like comments online where, people just, they can't handle it, or not handle it, but it's just not for them. It's just too out of tune sounding. So I think, yeah, the people that I know, friends, they're probably going to be nicer and more, more constructive criticism rather than saying it, they hate it. But, yeah, I know it's kind of tough stuff to get into. I didn't like microtonal music when I first, heard it. It rubbed me the wrong way too. It almost made me feel sick a little bit. So I get it if it rubs you the wrong way. But now, I mean, this stuff sounds totally normal to me, which is for better or for worse. My brain has been rewired a little bit with kind of working with all this stuff for so long. So I've kind of lost perspective.
I love it. I think I've listened to a bunch of your music, and it's just it's like well constructed, well written. Clearly you have a lot of music theory knowledge. I'd like to hear, did you go to music school or anything like that? But it's just, it's so interesting. And what I love is it's music that I want to listen to. A lot of make weird music stuff is like, I have to kind of prepare myself, like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to check this out, or it
Right.
feels like labor or something. But honestly, I feel like I can kind of sink right in, and there's something there for everyone to enjoy, like the deep music listener, like, oh, that's so interesting. And then someone like my wife who just wants to hear a good song. So,
Yeah.
really kudos to you. I think you're doing something very innovative and interesting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Have you seen that woman? She has like a whole, it's like a keyboard with a million hexagonal buttons, and they're like,
Yes. The Lumitone.
yes.
Yeah. Are you talking about Dolores Cathrino or maybe Zia Arose? There's
I don't
a
think
couple
it's either of
women.
those names.
Okay. Oh, Elaine Walker, perhaps.
That might be it. I follow one or two of them on YouTube, but not a lot of videos pop up. But yeah, tell
Okay,
us about
yeah.
your musical background and how are you doing this on keyboards? It didn't look like you had any unusual keyboards next to you. Tell us
Yeah.
what's going on.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my musical background is, I started playing guitar as a teenager and in bands, and through my 20s I was in bands and stuff. But I did go to music school twice, I guess. I graduated from Berklee College of Music, but I started at a school called Cal Poly, and I was just studying classical guitar. So after 2 years I transferred because I didn't want to just be a classical guitar player. So yeah, I went to Berklee and then moved to Chicago, where I was playing in a bunch of bands and working on my own stuff. And then I got my MFA in music composition from CalArts in 2012. So at CalArts, they have a lot of composers there who are into microtones. That's really where I dived in, in earnest, and really sort of learned that there was something there that sort of fit my aesthetic goals. Because like I said before, I learned about microtones probably when I was a teenager. I heard Glenn Branca. I don't know if you're familiar with his music, but he did stuff with the harmonic series, and that element of the consonants in the stuff that he did was always like the attractive thing for me. So I was kind of, I don't know, I've been drawn to it, but I didn't really understand it until I went to grad school and sort of dived in more to the theory and started making my own, microtonal stuff. So
If I remember correctly, Glenn Branca, he passed away, right?
he did, yeah.
Yeah. His widow is Reg Bloor, I
Reg
believe,
Blur, yeah.
who's an incredible experimental guitarist. And I also featured
Yeah.
her on a playlist. But yeah,
I
really
saw that.
interesting musicians, both of them.
Absolutely. I met Reg. I played for Glenn 3 times when he did his 100 guitar symphony This was a long time ago, but I was a big fan of his for a long time, so I volunteered to do his 100 guitar army thing, which was really
That's
cool.
cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So we should wrap this up because I intended on 10 minutes of talking, and
Sure.
I definitely went deep.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard with this stuff to not extend the time a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about like where and how can people support you? I found your music on Spotify, but what's the best place to get your music?
Yeah, I mean, Spotify's great. I have a Bandcamp that has all of my stuff. I sell vinyl records there, CDs, tapes, if you're into the physical media thing. Not for every album, but every album I do, I always try to release physical media. So Bandcamp is a good spot if you're into that, or just downloading the, high quality file. I have a website, brendanbyrnes.com, that'll link you to all my other stuff, social media, if you want to follow me on that. My Instagram handle is blandorbirds. BLANDOR_birds. It's a long story. But yeah, I release videos. I'm trying to release more, and I just started playing live in LA. So if anybody lives in LA, I'm starting to play shows. I just played my first couple shows in years a couple weeks back, and with these guitars, I'm doing like a solo microtonal guitar set. So if you live in LA, you can keep an eye out for that.
Very cool. And then for anyone who is looking for more of this kind of music, can you share some other artists or albums that might have inspired you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot. I mean, it's still a small community, but a great place to start is like Ben Johnston, who does more orchestral stuff. Toby Twinning does choir, just intonation choir, which is really amazing. There's I hope I don't forget anybody, but Sevish is probably, that's a go-to person. He does electronic music pretty much exclusively, but it's really great. A lot of drum and bass influence, really well composed, crafted stuff. There's a band called Mercury Tree that does some really wild out there 17-tone microtonal prog, I guess you could say. Zia Rose, who I mentioned before, she's got a YouTube channel where she explains some microtonal theory in depth, and she's really great. Let's see, Fast Zolta. If you start looking at microtonal stuff, you'll kind of see a lot of names repeated, but those are good places to start. If you're into theory stuff, there's 2 papers by Paul Ehrlich. He goes really in depth into the 22-tone equal temperament system and makes an argument for why it's a great tuning system. So I got my start there, and it'll help you really understand microtonal tuning systems. I also have a YouTube tutorial on microtonal stuff. I tackle theory in sort of the way that I see it, at least as a good starting point. So that's probably enough to get started.
What's a track that we should close on?
Yeah, I like Out of the Sun. That's one of my personal favorites. That's in 27.
Okay, which album is that one on?
That's
here it
on
is.
Holocene Dream. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, cool. We'll close on that one. Thank you so much,
Cool.
Brendan. Really appreciate you engaging in this conversation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Nice to talk to you.